Lynn's here. Hi, and Terry. Hi, everyone. So, okay, Robert. Hi. Hey. I am going to try and do this. Is Chloe there? Hi, Chloe. I'm going to try and do this. I set it differently, so we're actually in landscape because this is a very landscape sort of an image. But it does mean that the chat fades away, so I don't see it as easily, just so everyone knows. You'll see? See, I have my Alaska toque on. Toques are cheap here. So I'm gonna pick up a couple more because I lose toques so much, because that's what happens. It is just going 7 o'clock in the morning, and I also have my sunglasses because, hey, we're in the north and the sun doesn't really go down. Hi, good morning. So I'm thrilled to have everyone here. We're just a little early, so now I was testing my reception coming over. It was a little shaky, but I really wanted to start here, and I'll show you why in a second. Okay, Robert, nice to see you, my friend. For all my Canadians on board, happy May long. So this is a long weekend in Canada today. It's a little embarrassing, I think. Hey, Julie, but it's technically, Natalie, bonjour. It is technically Queen Victoria's birthday, so Victoria Day weekend. Excuse me. That's that morning fresh air. Hi, Marcia. Hey, Paula. So when we come down, Solange, hola, hola. Solange, hola, ¿cómo estás? Bienvenidos. Estoy en Alaska aquí. Estoy súper lejos de todo en el mundo. No sé si entiendes el inglés, pero si tienes preguntas, pregúntame. So, hi everyone. It's lovely to have you here. So yeah, it is technically Queen Victoria's birthday. Canada is the only country in the world, hi Jeff, that celebrates it. Seems superfluous to me. But down where I live, in the Rockies, very much it's considered the start of summer. So May long weekend. In fact, my friend Rod, who I'm traveling with right now. Hi, Sandy. Good morning. Hi, Jay. Okay. I can tell you one year we went out camping on May long weekend because everyone goes camping normally at home. And we were going to do a climbing weekend. And I woke up in the tent. This is back at university. And I woke up in the tent just sweating. And we opened the tent and it snowed like a foot. And so it was like being in an igloo. It's cold. Paula just said it looks cold here. I must remember to repeat questions because afterwards they don't show up. It looks cold here. Now, Skagway, where I am here, the word Skagway in Tlingit means the windy place. And it is windy. Hi, hi, Lynn. So I have my headphones in. Hey, Alison, well, hi there from the clan in Banff. So it must be nice to be in Banff. It's I'm going to be in Banff tomorrow. Different Banff, but so happy Sunday to everyone. Yeah, it's Sunday, isn't it? I'm one day off, so tomorrow's actually the May long. Yeah, oh, the chat will be delayed. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm here in Skagway, and this is a Tlingit community historically. The Tlingit are the people who also live down in Juneau, which is only about 40 or 50 miles down, but only by water. You know, Juneau, Alaska is the capital of Alaska. It is about 30,000 people, and it is the only capital city in the United States with no road access. Can anyone guess the only capital in Canada with no road access? It's delayed chat, but the only capital in Canada with no road access is in fact Iqaluit, the capital of Nunavut. Obviously straight north of here is Yukon Territory. There's 3 territories in Canada: Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. So, but the cold here, it's probably right around 0, maybe 1 or 2 degrees, but the sun is just peeking up behind me there in the distance. Sherbrooke, Sherbrooke's in Quebec. So the sun is behind me. We are 59.5 degrees north. The border with British Columbia is 60 north. And so really the line across the north is the 60th parallel. And again, for Canadians on board, you remember that we used to have a show on TV called North of 60. So I'm a little bit south of 60 here, but I'm at the top of the Lynn Canal, which is the deepest canal in North America. You'll not freeze, Paula, because it's dry and windy. Now, Juneau rains all the time. Don't book anything in Juneau when you're coming up here on the cruise until you see what the weather's like. But up here, it almost never rains because it howls with wind. So if you look at this on a map, 1 hour by ferry is the town of Haines, just down the valley. In fact, let me turn this around. I'm at their little outdoor area. Too late. Oh, bummer. See if you can cancel some stuff. I'll tell you what to do. But I came over to this site here because I'm by the Skagway River. That is what a true fjord looks like. So this is the deepest fjord in North America, one of the longest, if not the longest in the world. So if you track this whole thing down, you go down for about an hour. On the right is Haines, that's the Chilkat River. That's where you have that huge, huge salmon run late in the year in September, and up to 5,000 eagles congregate there. Hi Lucy, nice to see you. You will see that there's at least 2 ships. I think there's 3 in anyway. So there is a Viking line. That's pretty terrifying that the Vikings have made it all the way here. They made it to Newfoundland 1,000 years ago. There's a carnival line, and I'm sure there's 1 or 2. By the way, in the distance, that's a landslide that goes back generations. However, they are now busing people to the ships on that side because the large rock at the top is coming loose, and they're not letting people walk there should it break free. So it's a really different thing. But you'll see the snow. By the way, where the snow line is here, more or less, that's up where the border is with Canada. So when people came here, so obviously I love to talk about the Indigenous history here, and the signs are bilingual now. Tlingit is a fabulous language. When you move south, the Tlingit people live all the way south. They used to control the trade with the Athabascan people up in the interior, the Athabascan language groups, the Tuchoni, for example, the people up near Whitehorse. If you move south, you meet the Tlingit and then the Haida, and the Haida down in Haida Gwaii, of course, used to be known as Queen Charlotte, and then you get down to the Coast Salish down around Vancouver. Now, up around the corner, and this is where we spent 3.5, 4 hours yesterday, is where Daae was. Hi, Anne. Good morning to you. Nice to see you here. And Daae was the other port. So Captain Moore came here about 10 years before the gold rush, knowing this would be an access point to the interior, built his homestead. I'll walk over there with you today. And so he came in and sat here. But then in 1896, George Carmack's Dawson, Charlie, and Skookum Jim find gold up in the Klondike. Now keep in mind, let me just turn around. That's what I want to do. I want to walk over this bridge. There's the pass all the way up into Canada in the distance there. To get up to the Klondike from here is another 800 kilometers of what would have been almost impenetrable wilderness to people who had first arrived here. Remember, some of these people, and so yesterday you might see I did a 5-minute video, and I'd like you to watch it and share it if you can, about the graveyard, because the single biggest tragedy of the gold rush, which was full of tragedy, was the avalanche that occurred on Palm Sunday on April 3rd, 1898, over on the Chilkoot Pass, when the whole thing came down. It is mind-blowing, Chloe. When the avalanche came down, the Tlingit warned them, but of course the miners didn't listen to the Indigenous people, and 70 miners were killed. And then this town was controlled by Soapy Smith. It's amazing how Soapy Smith has almost proven to be a hero now. Hi, Karen. Nice to see you, my friend. Soapy Smith it's almost a hero. I mean, the cruise ships make a fortune telling his stories now, but he was a true con man that ran this town like a gangster, and they rushed off to Daae to help the miners, and all he did was steal from them. I mean, it's just a tragedy of tragedies. In fact, all of this town was just uncontrolled. But what happened is when they got up to the border, so you either went up the Chilkoot Pass, which is where Daae was, or you came up here through the White Pass, which became known and tragically known as Dead Horse Trail, because people would walk their horses up there, and apparently the conditions were so brutal that horses would actually commit suicide. Can you imagine? And then they started in 1898 the construction of the White Pass and Yukon Rail. And upon completion of that, it went all the way up to Whitehorse. And Whitehorse wasn't even a town, it was just rapids. But it went up there. In 1900 it arrives, and that is sort of considered the end of the Klondike Gold Rush. It happened that quickly. So here's the Skagway River coming out. Paula, good question. Paula just asked it goes on the White Pass. That's why this is literally called the White Pass. I was here doing my pull-ups earlier today. It needs to be done. And very clean around here. I am having yerba mate. You know, that's the tea I drink at home, but I found it in canned form for only $5 because everything's expensive here. Excuse me, I still have this nasty little cough, but it's just the cold coming out. Now, when you come here to Skagway, and I'm doing this partly because my friend Paula is coming here on a cruise in a couple of weeks, you obviously are going to take the train up and down, which is a wonderful experience. It's a narrow gauge train, but there are some nice walks around here. And this little one, see they have a pet cemetery, which is sort of lovely, but you can do a nice little 2-mile walk just around the corner here. Don't do it alone because there are bears everywhere. And say we saw a lovely bear. I just posted a picture today. We saw a beautiful bear today, and we thought he was a healthy kind of 3-4-year-old bear, and he even relieved himself in front of us. And then when we turned off the video, he walked over the burn, and suddenly we saw at least one, if not two, babies. So she actually was a she. But it's neat to see. Now I've got my toucan, but it is windy here. Now the good news about the wind in Skagway is that it almost never rains here because it just gets blown out and it gets blown up into those hills in the distance. Now the length of town is not huge. Karen, you're coming in September. Lovely. Then if you're coming in September, I'm going to walk over to Pullen Creek. Later August and early September, there's a salmon run in the creek. So absolutely what you do when you're this time of year. Well, my advice in Skagway always is as soon as you dock, race off the ship. And this is also true in Juneau and in Ketchikan, because this town is 832 people. It will have 14,000 people walking on it later today. Now the wind is just howling here. I don't know if you can feel that, but that's why the fjord stays clear. But it's not that cold a wind. My hands are a little cold, but it's a small one. But this is very typical of small town Alaska. Here, remember Alaska, the whole state, if you dropped it into the lower 48, down in the, you can feel the wind, exactly. It feels like Katabatic wind off the glacier. But I'll get this extra windy here, but I wanted to come and show this. But this entire state, if you dropped into the lower 48, it takes up 2/3 of the continent of the United States, right? If you dropped Alaska onto Western Europe, it would cover all of it, all of Western Europe. So, France, Britain, Germany, the whole bit. This is a bear-proof bin, and I'm going to show you how it works because you have to slide your hands in. Same ones we have at home. Here's their little airport. You can actually fly to Anchorage from here. And they are small planes that would be buffeted about, so try not to have to fly. But there's the White Pass up in the distance there. But yeah, these isolated communities. Suddenly I'm out of the wind a little bit more. But here's the sign that I put up at the beginning. So there is the Welcome to Skagway. Of course, the Alaska flag. Alaska, as you know, was Alyeska, and it was a Russian holding until it was sold or purchased by William Seward, Secretary of State, in 1867. They started that process to buy the state of Alaska. There's all the helicopters out there. Is Judith here? Nice to see her. But they were purchased in 1867, and that's what really spurred on the United Canadas, Quebec and Ontario, Upper and Lower Canada, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, to reach out to the nascent colony of British Columbia. And good question, Chloe, and create Canada. And of course, then the Northwest Territories were purchased from the Hudson's Bay Company, and the first territory to be removed, to be cut out as its own territory, was the Yukon Territory, way up there in the distance because of the Klondike Gold Rush. So much history. By the way, there's nice homes. There's actually a road up around back here, and that's the road around to Daae, about 8 miles, I guess, around it all together. Make sure when you come up here to go around to Daae and to see the Gold Rush Cemetery. Now, about half of Whitehorse is down here today. Keep in mind, Whitehorse calls itself the Wilderness City, and it is, and it's 28,000 people. But for the people of Skagway, it's their big city. And so there's this, it's kind of, we drove down in a car, obviously, with Whitehorse plates on it. So I love the fact that we've got a sign saying city center, like you need some direction around here. So there's really 3 main streets that go right up the valley and up to the train station. But yeah, this is their little airport. So it's isolated living. Now, Chloe asked whether the snow stays year round, and it does. So I've always seen snow on the top of the mountains up here. And so up at the pass, the Canadian border is at Fraser, and it's technically British Columbia because it's just south of 60. And that's where all the lakes are. I did do a cold plunge in there the other day. My friends made me do one. It was the one place that wasn't muddy, but it was lovely to swim up at that. And that's up at the top. Was about 3,000 feet, about 1,000 meters. It is very atmospheric. So here the permanent, on their sign when you drive into town, it says population 832 or 862, something like that. And in the winter, it would be very quiet. I have been to Skagway when there's no ships in. But here the population in the summer swells enormously because so many staff for the cruise ship work, of course, which is pretty important. Sorry. I was there the day I set the record heat. Oh, wow. Yes, it is actually amazing how hot it can get. Hey Marlene, nice to see you. It is amazing how hot it can get in the interior. So Yukon is a continental climate because of these high mountains. Even though it's quite close to the water, it actually takes about 2 hours to drive. Well, it's 2 hours and 15 minutes to drive down from Whitehorse, and a lot of Yukoners keep boats down here. And that's a spectacular drive. Now the train is just ready to go out, so I will show you the train in a minute here. But that continental effect. However, Yukon's quite interesting. Yukon does have the coldest temperature ever recorded in North America. That was in Snag, which is up near Beaver Creek, which is the most westerly community in Canada, right by the border, the land border with Alaska, if you take the Alaska Highway. And 1945 or 42 or something, back when they were building the Alaska Highway, and it was recorded minus 66 Celsius. However, you can actually get up into the high 20s and even into the 30s, which is into the 80s Fahrenheit, in late May and early June. So its warmest period isn't July and August. But here in Skagway, it's always cool because the wind is just blowing. You'll see some markings up on the side of the hill. That's for their local school. Do you know, I'm really happy with this landscape format. I had to set it differently. It's just to say the chat goes away. So here are these gigantic cruise ships that come in. It's really, hi Justina, really, the really fun when like Norwalk goes through the ships. You don't want that to happen. It's a world of extremes up here in every sense. Remember, just a few days ago, I was in Dawson City, and oh, it doesn't say Haynes. Yeah, I'll tell you about it. Up in Dawson right now, there is no night. There's twilight for about 3 hours, but of course they pay for that in December. So Haynes, which I was talking about earlier, if you go straight south, there's a ferry from here, and the Alaska Marine Highway goes down there. Oh, here's another train prepping itself. They pull right up to pick up the passengers off the ships. But 1 hour straight down there is Haynes. It's on, looking south, it's on the right hand side. Haynes is the actual traditional Tlingit community there. There's Fort Seward there, actually one of the original forts when they replaced the Russians. Of course, the Russian capital was at Sitka. Sitka's on Barenhof Island, and then they moved the capital to Juneau. That was a gold rush as well. But Haynes is about 2,500 people, and it's the Chilkat River. That's where you have this huge salmon run late in the year, and that was known as the Dalton Pass. Dalton was a fellow who had this bright idea to bring meat up into the Yukon, and brought cattle and walked them all the way up that pass. It's a long but gentler pass. Fascinating. And when the salmon are running, you'll see Indigenous people set up fish wheels, but it's a fishing community. Haynes is lovely, and I really did waffle on taking my friends over there, but you know what, it was going to be $100 to go back and forth on the ferry, and then we wouldn't have had as much time for exploring Daié, so I didn't do it. But it's an hour away, but if you drive it, it's 2, 3, 4, 5 hours around. Like that's how massive the distance is. And they call it the Golden Triangle as a route. So we're coming up by the White Pass and Yukon Rail, and here's people starting to come off the cruise ships. But this is why when you come to Alaska on a cruise, make sure you get off the ships as early as possible, and you can enjoy these small towns before they're just overrun. And I was looking in the window yesterday at a place selling gold nuggets and everything. Now, if I were to buy a nugget, I would buy one up in Dawson, of course. But the gentleman who came out was absolutely not from here. Not that that matters, but they're the same people who get moved around by the cruise ships. And so, they pack everything up on about September 26th, close this down, move all the gold down to the Caribbean and call it Caribbean gold. That's the kind of funny thing. But here we are. So now down to the right here, I'm walking over. You can see it's narrow gauge. If you're into train history, remember they managed to build this train just by hand up through the mountains. I mean, the amount of people that died doing that as well was just incredible. And for years and years, till 1982, it was the route up where they would shuttle goods up to Whitehorse. Now in 1942-43, they built the Alaska-Canada Highway, or the Alaska Highway, and that obviously changed everything. But that was because of the war effort. So 80 or 90% of the Alaska Highway is actually in Canada, but they built it to move troops up. And of course, Alaska was attacked. The only part of the United States that was occupied by the Japanese during World War II were a few of the Aleutian Islands. To this day now, there's 4 ships in here, 2 more ships up to the side there. So, I mean, pretty amazing. But I just want to give you this view for a second. Right up there is Broadway. Now, Broadway is real. I mean, the buildings are real. It's just that, of course, they're so supported now by all this cruise industry that it's all kind of, it's a little contrived. And they have young people from all over the States who come up here and dress in period clothing and give stories about Soapy Smith the gangster and all of that. And not that that's a bad thing, but I always recommend getting a few streets away from where the cruises are. Hey, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the contribution. Contributions are much appreciated because it's expensive traveling up here. It's still become a real joke with my friends because we could have spent a week in Hawaii for what it cost us to go up and drive up to Dawson and stay in pretty rough hotels. See that? Sha is woman. And kakwa, I think, it's a glottal stop in the language. But those are the public washrooms, but they're in Tlingit language. So it's so nice to see that presence. But I just want to come up and show you. So for those of you who are coming here in November, this is Little Pullen Creek, which is a very, very clean creek. And you will see a salmon run in here, but not till late August. And it's just it's one of the most wonderful things to see. But here, I love this particular picture because it gives us a sense of the fjord. Right up at the top. So I'm on the Skagway side, clearly. This is Daae. So that was the famous Chilkoot Pass. That's where they walked up there and they walked around, and there's Lake Bennett. So every tree on the edge of that lake is 126 years old because 126 years ago they built rafts and they sailed up, and the first major obstacle, well, that was already the fourth or fifth, but the first major one is they got up and they found these rapids that look like the mane of a white horse, hence White Horse Rapids. And that is where the border was controlled by the Northwest Mounted Police, the Mounties. And this is that same story. So Skagway became this lawless, out of control place. Thanks, Michelle. Good morning to you. Yeah, salmon run in early September. Absolutely, right in this creek here. Here, I'll show you the creek. And they would control, and they told them they had to have enough supplies to last a year. And then they taxed them, which of course they're very good at in Canada. But on the Canadian side, in the Yukon, there were 5 murders during the gold rush, and the Mounties caught all the murderers, and that's why the Mountie always gets his man. So this little creek here. So yeah, you will see a salmon run in there. So and salmon runs are amazing to see. You know, if you have, I love this, if you have a successful life as a salmon, it means you die where you were born. If not, something untoward has happened to you. So it is quite emotional. The salmon go all the way up to Whitehorse on the Yukon River out from the Bering Sea. Now, what does that mean? That is over, it's about 2,800 kilometers. I mean, isn't that just incredible? So it is a very moving thing. But I want to come and show you this map here. Don't know how clear it is. I mean, Alaska is massive, massive, massive. And in Skagway, you're just in this little corner in this area here. And then that's where you cross up. Skagway's there, up to the border with British Columbia and Canada, and then up into Yukon. But Dawson City, like I say, is 800 kilometers north of here. Right? So the people started arriving in 1897, wintered here, and then 1898. They figure between 30 and 40,000 of them actually made it up to Dawson City, and by the time we got there, most of the good claims were already pegged out and mined. So, I mean, it's just remarkable to think that. And this is the other story. U.S. Army invades Skagway. And when you see that, of course, that was all the construction for the Yukon Highway, the Alaska-Canada Highway, which starts in Dawson Creek, British Columbia. And it ends technically at Delta Junction. However, you can actually drive all the way down eventually to Homer, Alaska. And what I want to do, however, when I get my proper van, not my one that I had before, but an all-wheel drive with a winch on it, the whole bit, is I am going to go all the way up to Tuktoyaktuk, which is up the Dempster Highway, high in the Arctic. You can technically drive to Prudhoe Bay in Alaska, but that doesn't really count, as that's just a haul road. But you drive up to Nunavik and Tuktoyaktuk in Northwest Territories, you go for a swim in the Arctic Ocean, then you turn around and you drive all the way down south of Panama City. You have to then put your vehicle onto a ship, into a crate, and get it moved to Columbia because there is no road through the Darien Gap. And because I have friends from Scotland watching, of course, the Darien Project was exactly what bankrupted the Kingdom of Scotland and led to the Act of Union. So it's a whole story. A story I've told when I'm in Panama. But then you drive all the way down to Ushuaia, down there at the very bottom of Argentina, and go swim in the Beagle Channel of the Magellan Straits. So that's my retirement plan. So that's why, don't you love the road sign to Whitehorse? So that is why I appreciate if we can keep growing this channel so much, because if we can grow this enough that I could actually do these virtual tours for a living, then I could do that, you see, and take people on these journeys to all these fabulous places. So here's all the different lakes on the train, and the train is well run. It's now owned, I believe, I was looking into the corporate structure, it's now actually owned by Carnival. Holland America are really the first ones to start doing tours up here, and they took over most of the tourism into Yukon, for better and for worse, because then they've pulled out most of their buses, and it's much harder to visit Yukon than it used to be. But have a look at all this. There is the famous Chilkoot Trail. That's in 1898, when these people would walk up and down that hill, and they'd have to do it about 18 times to move all their goods up, and that's where the avalanche happened on April 3rd and killed 70 of the miners. You know, it's a very, very meaningful thing. And then here is the old port when you go back. Yeah, doesn't that sound like a great plan? So the van that I want is only about $200,000. Now have a look. There's Skagway in the Tlingit language as well. Windy place. But some people really are bothered by wind. I don't find it. Doesn't bother me at all. Oh, I have to show you. So the other day when we arrived, it was really clear when we got here the afternoon. And I suddenly, in about 2 hours, I will have no phone connectivity, because you have 15,000 people off these ships trying to use the one cellular tower. And that just cuts it out, but it works in the morning. But there are a whole series of avalanches on the top of that peak over there, and then you'll see the helicopters flying up for helicopter tours, and then later in the year you see the airplanes going up, and they actually land up on there and take people dog sledding. But the funniest thing is, as long as I've come up here, they always tell, yeah, there's a few to go there. They always have the salmon up there, and they say that an eagle dropped it. And it's every year they tell that story. So, you know, there's some of those kind of things with mass tourism. But cruising is extremely important to Southeast Alaska. I mean, it really defines their economy in most of these towns. There is still mining, not here, but let's just have a little look at this. Now, I did do a little walk yesterday morning, but I want to take you right up Broadway. And here they are heading north, right? So this is the Centennial Statue, 1897. But that is a Tlingit guide at the front there. And of course, they knew the routes because they traded with the Athabascan people of the interior for, well, thousands of years, right? Remember the area, and it's a term that I don't know if people know it, the term as well. But this, when you get up to Yukon and up in Whitehorse, there's the Beringia Visitor Center. So Beringia was the term of the landmass during the last ice age, which connected Alaska with Siberia. Now, you all learned at school that during that last ice age, Beringia opened up and people walked over into Yukon and into what Turtle Island, North America, and they became Incas and Aztecs and everything. Now, that story is true. It's just not entirely true. And why I say that is there's very clear evidence that people migrated down the coast maybe 40,000 years ago, so a whole different population. This gives you a sense of how much snow actually falls. So at home, at our train station in Banff, we'll see parked in the winter the big plows. But this, imagine this thing cutting its way through the tracks. And when you come down by the US border, which is on a steep hill, I mean, we dropped, 32-mile descent or something. But as you come down there, they not only have the pegs on the side of the road, so the plows know where the edge of the road is, they even had them over the top. So it means in the winter you get a tunnel of snow. I have been in Whitehorse in the winter, and Haines, Yukon dog sledding, but I've never been down to Skagway in the winter. I'd sure love to come and see it. And, you know, it'd be a close-knit community, typical of small-town Alaska, right? I mean, when the cruise ships aren't here, it's a small place. So here's the visitor center, Klondike Gold Rush. Now, I didn't check, but for those of you coming on the cruise, they used to show a film up there. So there's a couple of visitor things. And the other place you need to go if you can is Seattle, Washington. They actually have a satellite office of the Chilkoot Trail because, of course, the whole story, the ship's left from Seattle. And they showed 2 films about how the wealth of this place, the wealth of Seattle, was born off the gold rush. And one of the many stories is a young immigrant from Sweden came up here, but he realized you make a lot more money selling supplies to miners than actually mining. And his surname was Nordstrom, which is one of the biggest shops in the United States. Now, this is what it looks like in 1897 when the miners show up here. See the snow on the ground? There's a little Broadway street. It's pretty powerful. But when you talk about the history of this sort of area, do they keep the road between... That's not a stupid question, Chloe. They do keep the road open all winter. They plow it open, absolutely. So have a look at this. So of course, man's best friend, as they say. But just the, both, it is testament. I mean, the gold rush got under my skin so many years ago, but it's both the majesty of the Turtle Island, the North American settler experience, the desperation and but the ingenuity as well. And in the Yukon sense, I always think of the fellowship of it. That real sense, the Yukon Order of Pioneers has a special area in the cemetery and everything. But down here in Skagway, it was just lawless. But yeah, I just find this, really moving. By the way, also around some of the houses, famously, they grow the biggest rhubarb in the world up around Fairbanks in Alaska. And of course, in the big interior, Fairbanks is very flat. So when you're getting up into this time of the year, the midnight sun, basically the sun doesn't go down. Now we keep saying it circles around in the sky. Of course, it doesn't circle around. We spin, and the sun kind of does what the sun does. But the growing season is short but intense. So there's the Red Onion Saloon. So for $20, you can go and have a tour of the brothel. If you want something more, I expect it's more expensive. No, but it's interesting because we talk so much about, as I've mentioned on the last couple of tours, up at Bennett, which is where they built the rafts to sail up. There was a town up there, a ghost town now, but that is where Donald Trump's grandfather owned the first brothel in the north, and that is the origin of their family's money. So it's sort of an interesting thing to see. So there's the Red Onion Saloon. But this is why you want to come in, walk up Broadway this time of day. Now, jewelry stores everywhere, but here's the famous Visitor Information Center. This building does go back to 1899. How's that? And that's all driftwood up there. Yeah. Well, there is actually the local pub, and we were in there last night because they had the best TVs for watching the hockey. The Oilers won, by the way. I know you were all really hoping for that. So I'm sure you're all very excited. So there's going to be a game 7. But it is actually, the pub is called the Happy Ending. So you see the Golden Nugget Hotel, but that dome up there just has a tiny echo, a reminiscent of, see, Justina, do you have to go? Reminiscent of the Russian architecture that you had down the coast here. Well, Chloe, we're playing every other night, but both. I mean, obviously, we're all sad that Vancouver and Edmonton are playing now. We would like an all-Canadian final. By the way, up here in the north is the one place that you can still buy ivory. And they keep finding ivory here because they were the woolly mammoths. So they're not killing any animals to make them, right? Question, with all the cruise ships docked. Oh, okay, Karen, it's because they're just getting off the ships now. So they come in, like they have to be all on board for about an hour before they start sailing away. So this is a thing, this is something that I actually don't like in the United States. You see so often this kind of image of Indigenous people as the sort of noble, savage look. It's kind of unnecessary in my mind. So really the people who are going on excursions, that's why the trains are waiting for them. So they'll get off, get on their trains. But by middle of afternoon here, like I say, my phone doesn't work anymore because they're all walking the streets, and you go back 3 streets and there's nobody. There up there is Alaskan fry bread. Finn, my son, has cooked fry bread before on tours, and that is originally came from Scotland. Scottish fur traders came over, but it's become sort of the Indigenous bread. We call it bannock at home. So that's a nice, and this is, I know, just advertising, but it's a nice mural. I'm staying at this hotel down on the left there, but you know what I'm going to do? Actually, I'll go up one more street, and it's basically the only hotel. The West Market was called. They're changing their name, but those were all part of those Holland America ones. Holland America had brought up these, Yeah, he opened, the hotels, but it's, they did, but it was, well, when you see the story, by the way, of the Trump family one, I mean, it was one place. This old Sweet Tooth Cafe, I used to have breakfast there, but that's turned into a jewelry store as well. So very typical of all of these ports. And there's the Bonanza Bar and Grill, and everyone will go in there for a local beer. But as you do come up the street, so right at the end is where you find the main center for their trains, and that's where the cemeteries are. Now, obviously gold nuggets and everything for sale, but now there were lots of different gold rushes up here, but the big one, of course, was the Klondike. To the south of us was Barkerville, 1862. 1858 was the Fraser River, and of course 1848, 1849 was San Francisco. So you can actually track the people moving up into this part of the world. But there's the Klondike Gold Rush National Historic Park. So there is actually a fair bit around. You can even come here and try gold panning, which I do recommend. And then they try and sell you the gold you find, of course. So there's the little saloon down there. But I want to take you around back. Oh, sorry, I'll go up one more street. Take you around back and just show you the original settlement that was here. Because this Captain Moore, who's got a couple of bridges named after him, again, moved up here, would have been very, very isolated living, but they had access to good timber here. So if you watch the video I did from the cemetery yesterday, you'll see that I'm in amongst like giant old growth Douglas firs. So the climate here is lovely, and actually down at Haines, you even get some cedar trees, which is a long way north, but these little microclimates you have all over the place. Oh, just for the fun of it, if anybody Anchorage, you'll see this as well. This is where you could come and buy a fur bikini, or maybe that's a mankini there. I don't know. See? Heck of a deal. It's only $44. I don't know. I think that would be kind of ticklish to swim in. But I love these ice cream shops. But let's just wander up a little further. So this is why. Well, thank you, Michelle. I'm glad you watched it. It is powerful, isn't it? And it's just, so among the many cons that happened here when Sobey Smith controlled the place, they ostensibly had a telegraph so you could get here and spend $5. Remember, $5 was like a month's rent in New York at that time. But you could spend $5 and send a telegraph home to say you made it safe and sound. But there was no telegraph wire. So all those kind of cons. And there was a terrible recession in the 1890s. It's often forgotten about. See the totems? And the totems, I love to see them here because this was a part of the world. I mean, the culture, the Tlingit culture, builds totems. We'll see what the old settlements are like. But here they call themselves the Garden City, and just at the very top of town, on the way out as you're driving up towards Yukon, they actually have community gardens. They're just lovely. But here's the Moore homestead, the Klondike Gold Rush. And so the ground here, because it's right at the ocean, isn't that frozen. Remember, up in Dawson City, you've got 60 feet of permafrost there. Now, up in the north, with the changing climate, of course, the permafrost is melting, and it's causing huge damage. Way up in Iqaluit, the capital of Nunavut, they've actually had leakage from their oil reserves because the ground is shifting so much it's affecting their groundwater. But down here was actually more moderate. But there's Captain Moore's vision, the gateway to the Klondike. So in 1887 he came here, so it took 10 years. And then kaboom, suddenly people arrived, and he was so overwhelmed that was that. But quite an impressive home. Well, thank you, Chloe. It's really fun to do, and I like to have these, and I don't know when I'm going to make it back up. Now, I was meant to this year, and it didn't work out, but I want to bring a whole group up on the cruise at some point. And I think I found a small bus company in Yukon because I want to run some more tours up here. It's just a lot harder than it used to be. You can do them out of Anchorage, but I always feel like you come to the north, and if you don't go up to Dawson City, you haven't really seen the north, because that's where the whole story is. And all of you coming on the cruise are going to love it. But so often the response after is that, oh, I really love the cruise, now I want to go see Alaska. But of course, within that Alaskan mentality, really the Klondike is the story. Now, the other place that I'd like to go to, you agree, Jillian? Yeah. See these? Look at the construction to build it. Remember, whenever you build one of these log cabins, you always have the arch down when you're cutting into the logs, because if you have it up, water can settle in, and then when the freeze happens, it peels your cabin apart. There was a style that they used every now and then with vertical logs as well. Now, someone's home. I don't want to go walk through their lawn back there. So here's an old warehouse. And as you get further north, everything is is built up on stilts, of course, because you don't want your ground freezing and thawing and shifting the whole time. And you do see the old cabins that way. It is pretty remarkable. But let's just wander up a little bit more because there's so much to see here. I don't mind. So it's about 20 to 8 in the minute. Yeah, it's saying here, performance, dance hall girls and prostitutes all attempted to mine the miner in Skagway's life. But when you read the old stats, and it's funny, my friends are really moved when we were reading one of the signs about the rush that came into here, the stampede as we call it. And they said, thousands of men, hundreds of women. So, women lived in, some women did extremely well for themselves, but there you go. Prostitutes came to Skagway to seek fortunes, but few succeeded. They lived in tents, boarding houses, and cramped cribs such as this building. Some had to share their income with madames and pimps. I mean, it's like I say, some of the whole gold rush experience I find just deeply moving, and other sides, just the utter desperation and just the abuse of humanity and animals as well. There's a long conversation that can be had about all of this. So, and there should, so there's lots of conversations. The amylite, if you're familiar with amylite, that is it's the only precious jewel from Alberta really, but it's where glaciers have scoured across fossils, and they left with this beautiful texture. So it's that's sort of a famous thing. Now there's another mural I wanted to get to just up around back here, and here come the tour coaches. Little by little, people go out on their tour, and then they come back in the afternoon. Of course, we met some really lovely people last night from the Boston area. People come from hockey places, so we're all watching hockey. So here's a nice mural up top. So Soapy Smith on the left and Frank Reed. So Robert, I tried to last year, and then unfortunately the agent I had just wasn't able to pull it off. But yes, I will. So Soapy Smith on the left, he was the gangster. Frank Reed came out of the mountains, out of the north, and he had about $2,000 in gold, which is, not a huge find, but was not nothing. And they stole it from him, and they actually shot each other, and they both died. So Frank Reed's monument at the cemetery says the man who saved Skagway, and Soapy Smith just as a little grave. So, interesting, the two types. But let's just keep going a little bit. The other element that I like to talk about in all these gold rush places is, of course, you had a Chinese population. The first Chinatown in North America was in San Francisco. The oldest one in Canada was Victoria, British Columbia. And there was always a double standard with Chinese people. And so up in Dawson, you actually had a Chinese community. We went out for Chinese food up there, and they were a Cantonese family, had lived up there for years, like 18 years. And the lady was just lovely. And, I said, "Say, which is thank you in Mandarin." And she says, no, we speak Cantonese. But she said, the dark in the winter doesn't bother me, just the cold. And I'm like, wow, I don't feel the same about that. The cold doesn't bother me, but it's the dark way up north there. But there's an Alaska liquor store, by the way, and a crab in the window. So, of course, king crab is caught up in Alaska. Not here. This is more halibut down in these particular areas. In fact, down in Juneau, I think that's where they caught the biggest halibut in history. So, so that's if you happen to like fish. Of course, halibut is becoming more and more expensive because there's less and less of it. See, this is what's happening now. These are the tour buses that are picking people up. Well, I had really hoped so this year, and say I had an agent who would do the booking for me, and unfortunately that just didn't work out. Normally it does, and they've come through for other things. But look at these lovely views when you do look down here. So these are big. I mean, these are proper tour coaches. These are like $800,000 vehicles. And so they move them up and around, but there's virtually none up in Yukon. But what a gorgeous view of those mountains up there. So the snow line up there is more or less equivalent to the border up at British Columbia in Canada. So why don't we just, if you have the energy, let's keep walking. You'll see this place is selling knives, but when it says an ulu store, ulu are those curved knives, and they're the ones that the Inuit use. And there is the town museum. Again, there's a lot to see if you give yourself time. Again, we spent 3 or 4 hours in the Daiei area yesterday, and just explored. And I was able to explore a lot more than I had planned. Dutch Harbor, yes, absolutely, Karen. Well, you've got, when you get out, so Dutch Harbor and Alaska, out in the Aleutian Islands is king crab, and of course up the Bering Sea. And then Kodiak Island, they do a lot of fishing off there. That's where the Kodiak bears are. They're the biggest bears in the world. They're just grizzlies that gorge themselves on salmon. Just so much so that they become massive. There you go. Very few people on that bus. I bet they're picking people up off the train. There's one of the old steam engines. I did get a little film of a steam engine backing up yesterday, which is neat to see as well. So, but this is an impressive bit of construction. And then they come up around back here. So it calls itself the Garden City. This is also, interestingly enough, Skagway itself is a very progressive town. So there is actually an Alaskan separatist movement. And of course, Alaska, generally speaking, is considered a more conservative state. But here you see pride flags, rainbow flags everywhere. And it's obviously Skagway's got its own little vibe. And these communities are so isolated that they have, they just have so many, Robert, each tiny community has its own vibe. Juneau is, it's a peculiar place. Juneau is the largest city in the United States by area. Basically, it's all mainland panhandle. And then Sitka is the second largest city, even though, although Juneau is not the smallest capital. Montpelier in Vermont, of course, is the smallest capital in the United States. But look at all these buses out here. So, I mean, the huge amount of rolling stock they've got down in these areas, and another train up in the distance. But there we are, ladies and gentlemen. I think I will pretty much plan on signing off now, just because my hands are getting a little cold holding the gimbal. But it's so nice to connect, and thank you for the contributions, everyone. For those of you who really are already booked on the cruises, feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty easy to contact through my website, and I'm happy to give you some advice. I've probably done the cruise over the years 20 something times. Now I haven't done it for a few years. You're very welcome. But I hope you enjoyed the tour. I mean, these are places for some people. This is about the most accessible part of Alaska. Although I do strongly recommend, if you do plan on a cruise, don't do the ones out of Seattle because they don't get all the way up to here. The ones out of Vancouver or out of Seward as you're coming down out of Anchorage. If you do those ones, then you want Glacier Bay for the day. And everyone gets so excited to go to Glacier Bay. They run outside in a couple hours, they're cold. Wait till you get up really close to the glaciers and then stay bundled up and watch it. But this one, I think Skagway is the real highlight. I like Juneau. Over the years, many of the tourists are like, oh, why are we here? Because they expect it to be sort of like a little Norwegian, a tiny Norwegian port. It's not. It's kind of a rough, distant, rainy place. But if you allow yourself to think of it in those terms, it's fascinating. And also you do have a Russian Orthodox church there. I have still not gotten to Sitka, and I'd like to get there. So sometime I'm planning a trip where I'll drive all the way up and then with my van and then take the Marine Highway down and stop at all the little ports. So there we go. So hi to everyone around the world. Peace and love. And I'll be driving right up that road in a few hours' time, flying down to Vancouver tonight. But we're going to go up and have lunch in Carcross again because this new little cafe there was so good the other day that we're going to do that again. All right, ladies and gentlemen, just a nice little view down Broadway there. See a few people going out to get their morning exercise, but it's so nice to connect, and thank you for coming along. Feel free to share this with anyone. I mean, what we want to try and do, of course, is get more and more people subscribing, and that's our big plan. But there you can see Sophie Smith. So all right, take care. Oh, and happy Victoria Day long weekend for all you Canadians. Yeah, all right, ladies and gentlemen, all the very best. Thanks for connecting. Thank you for your contributions, much appreciated. Bye bye.